Riot just announced a new shooter titled Project A currently that has been described internally as a spiritual successor to Counter-Strike, and their dev team includes the likes of Volcano, who has made Cash in Counter-Strike, even just recently, a newer version of the map. And we've only seen a few snippets of gameplay. Riot gave us roughly a 3-minute video, so how much can we possibly learn out of those 3 minutes? Well, this video is looking to maximize the answer to that question. We're going to take a look at each clip in depth and hope to create as much insight as we can about what the game currently is, what the game might be going forward. Note that much of this video is speculation. Most of it is backed up by some kind of visual evidence within the clips, but some of this stuff is going to be guessing. So nothing should be interpreted as fact, and this is, as they described early, they haven't even committed to revealing details until 2020, so they clearly are not as far along as they want to be to commit to critical game mechanics. So that being said, let's move forward. Alright, starting with the first clip, what is apparent immediately is that the gunplay is very clean, and the time to kill is very fast, as each player in this clip dies in one headshot, much like an AK-47 would do in Counter-Strike. Another thing that stands out is just the general map design. It appears to be either like an A bomb site or a middle, and when I say bomb site, I basically just mean objective area, as Counter-Strike's bomb sites are that, and it's hard to tell what the objective is in this game. Haven't really been revealed, and there's no A anywhere on this area, whereas we'll see later there is a B more towards the B bomb site or objective area. Another thing is the kill feed. What you can immediately tell is that the game is character based, as the characters are in the kill feed. What's also a nice touch about the kill feed is that a 3 appears when this player has gotten a triple kill. It's hard to tell whether that's an end of round kill only or whether it's just for any triple kill, as every triple kill we saw a player get was the last player they got. Moving on to the character models shown in this clip, it is clear that these models are very thin, maybe even thinner than Counter-Strike. Counter-Strike models have a little bit of visual clutter though around the backpack, sometimes hats that aren't necessarily hitboxes, so maybe Riot is trying to clean that up a little bit, and that's why they look thinner. What's also notable is that while I've seen some people say the movement seems slow from first person, the first person who swings this player is moving pretty quickly. So it might just be that everyone we've seen has a gun that makes you walk slowly, or is walking much like a Counter-Strike shift walk where you're not making footsteps. One question I have with this first clip is the question of whether this player is on attack or defense. And this is important because of the gun he's using and how the gun is behaving. This gun kills in one headshot multiple times, which would imply that all of these players, or at least some of them rather, have full HP and have been one-shot headshot by it. And this is important because if he's on defense, he has either bought this weapon or picked up this weapon. In Counter-Strike, the M4, which is the defensive rifle, cannot one-shot headshot. However, if this is a both sides kind of rifle, where you can use it on both sides, it appears in both shops, or if you can buy this rifle on the defensive side, then this would be a major change to how defense is structured and how the game is played, because CTs in Counter-Strike will always pick up the AK-47 if they have the option because of its one-shot headshot capabilities. However, you can also see in this clip that weapons drop when players are killed, which means that this player could be on defense and is just using the attacker's rifle that he picked up from a previous round. Last thing about this clip is the player's use of ADS. You'll notice that for the last kill they use ADS. We've seen semi-ADS mechanics in Counter-Strike, but it's hard to tell whether the ADS in this game will affect accuracy reset times or spray patterns. For the Krieg and the AUG in Counter-Strike, it will reduce your spray, make it easier to spray. It's hard to tell if it does that in this game, but we'll see going forward. Moving on to our second clip now, and it has a lot of stuff, so we'll be here for a while. We're clearly on a different character here, and immediately this character uses what appears to be a smoke grenade and what appears to be like pretty much a wall of smoke. We'll start with the smoke grenade. Initially, you'll notice that the smoke grenade has a tracer on it. You can, like, the player can still see that blue tracer through the wall, even when they're not directly peeking where that smoke has been thrown. I don't know if that's a spectate mechanic or a like kind of beta developer mechanic, um, but that would have a small impact in the game. If Counter-Strike you could see that your smoke hit or miss from when you threw it, then that would be moderately useful. Um, it'd also be good for practicing smoke lineups, but we'll have to see going forward if that stays. Another thing you'll notice about this smoke is that it stays on the ground before it has bloomed. So it lands, stays on the ground for a second, and then blooms all at once, pretty much. And during this process, it lands, and then in the middle of the screen, it says deploying must stop before activation. So this can mean one of two things. Either it's telling the player that the smoke has landed but not deployed, so don't peek. So it's kind of like a notification mechanic, or it is a player-controlled mechanic in which the player can hit a button to launch their smoke once it has hit the ground. It's hard to tell what that is without UI elements, and obviously controlling the game. We'll have to see what that looks like moving forward. Two more things I think are important about how the smoke grenade behaves, or how it initializes, and what indicators you can get from it being present. Initially, it will deploy and stay on the ground for a minute, as we've mentioned, and then it instantly launches. And then once it's about to go away, which I counted was about 6 to 7 seconds, which is about half the time of a CSGO smoke for reference, so much quicker, it will just instantly disappear. So in Counter-Strike, smokes have been kind of notorious for you being able to cheese them, in which, like, you know, there's one-way smokes, you can peek through the left or the right side and like see someone's foot and they can't see you. The way it dissipates have been, you know, notorious for showing on the minimap, or you can see them before they can see you based on graphic settings. The way that this just instantly spawns and then it instantly goes away, it essentially acts as if it's like a 2D JPEG blocking your vision, which makes it a lot more simple and a lot more easy to work around and a lot less unpredictable, which is good for reducing variance in environments where variance is not appreciated in the tactical shooter genre. Now, lastly about this smoke, you'll notice that it shows a color, and that color most likely corresponds to the character that threw it. So if you throw a smoke, it shows your color, and if you can see someone else's smoke, then you can tell who threw it. So knowing who has what utility in Counter-Strike is incredibly impactful, because if you know that like an Arch player on Inferno went to B through a smoke and then went back to A, then you can say, hey, they're 1 weak smoke A, just wait out their utility and then execute, whereas if we go B, they can lock us out of the bomb site the rest of the round. So if you see, you know, a character that threw a smoke on B, let's say a white smoke, and then you see that character who threw the white smoke on B on A, just by like briefly seeing them, then you know what kind of utility they have on A, and you know they have less utility on A. So that's very important and maybe overlooked. Moving on to the second ability the character uses, which appears to be a wall of water, as it appears the character throws like sprinklers on the ground that then shoot up water. It's basically a long smoke grenade in effect, and it's good to see something like this because moving into a tactical shooter, I believe many people appreciate abilities that are more tactical in nature and not damage based and not kill based, because having access to a wall that blocks off all vision in Counter-Strike would be huge. I mean, you have to buy like 3 or 4 smokes to do what that thing just did. Possibly. I don't know how long it's going to be. It's kind of hard to tell when it's in a room, but that's at least 2 smoke grenades, 3 smoke grenades long, and having access to that is a lot more interesting than, say, this character having some kind of, you know, kill ability. Like if every character had the knife throw ability that we'll see later, I think people would be a lot less excited. Certainly I would be less excited for the tactical options to be available rather than something more creative like this. So I think this ability is a good way to show off that they're more tactically creative than just damage based. Another notable thing about this clip is that it's clearly a bomb site design, and like I said, bomb site doesn't necessarily mean you're planting bombs, it just means it is more of an objective room, i.e. like Counter-Strike's objective bomb sites. And it's very similar to like an interior bomb site design in Counter-Strike. If you think about the other area we saw, which I still think is mid, But if it is A, then they have an outer bomb site and an inner bomb site like mini maps do. More close range bomb site, more long range bomb site, which is a very common Counter-Strike map design. Not surprising to see that, knowing that Volcano's on the project. Cache has an outside and inside bomb site. But what also is curious about this bomb site design is that it has a thin wall on what appears to be the back of it. And we haven't been able to see whether wallbangs are a part of this game. Wallbangs are a staple of Counter-Strike, even if Counter-Strike Go has reduced their effectability past 1.6's very strong wallbangs. We'll have to see if a wall like that at the back of the bomb site will be wallbang, because if there is going to be a wall that's going to be wallbangable, it's going to be that. That's about as thin as it's going to get. Concluding on this clip, you'll see that once the player is walking around the back of the bomb site, before he gets this last kill, a fuel level icon pops up on the middle of their screen. We'll talk about this more in the future and describe or guess what this indicator might mean for gameplay. Alright, on to the third clip. We're once again on a new character, and at the very start of the round this character builds what appears to be some kind of wall mechanic and then revives their ally. Let's start with the revive, because I'm sure a lot of Counter-Strike players and other competitive round-based shooter players saw this, probably cringed a little. A lot of revive mechanics are kind of frowned upon in Counter-Strike, as you're kind of seeing, every round you get one life, and once you're dead, you're dead. And that's kind of a core mechanic. However, something that's very important to notice about this revive is that the player respawns with just their pistol. You'll notice that when they get back into the game right before the clip ends and the final kill is made, he just has his pistol. Now, it's hard to tell whether that's like restricted to the pistol that you spawn with at the start, like a Glock or USP, or if that's whatever secondary weapon you had, because in Counter-Strike, if you die with a rifle, it drops the rifle, not your pistol. So if you had Op Deagle, it doesn't drop Deagle if you had Op. It just drops Op. So it potentially, in Project A, if you had Op Deagle and then got revived after you died and dropped your Op, I don't know whether you'd spawn with your Deagle or your spawn pistol. And that's slightly important. But what's more important is that you just don't get your, like, you're not reviving at full strength. If you revive, you have to go pick up the gun you had. Secondly, about the revive, I would guess that this revive has some kind of sound indicator that is either regional or map wide, because the player behind the wall that Volcano has created does not shoot the wall on its forming, which would make sense if you were going to shoot it later. What makes the player shoot is the initiation of the revive, which to me either signals that there's sound on it or the player reacted to the revive icon in the kill feed immediately. I would bet on sound more than kill feed, as you're not looking to the top right of your screen while playing, but you can hear everything. So my hunch is that the revive mechanic will make a sound, and that's what makes the player behind the wall start wallbanging it and tearing it down. Moving on to the fourth clip now, we once again see a new character, and in this clip, this character appears to use 4 unseen abilities. One of them is a smoke-like ability, one is a dash, that is horizontal, one is a vertical dash, and then one is an ability where the character pulls out knives and has the ability to throw said knives as a weapon. Alright, starting with the smoke here, you'll notice that it behaves very much like the smoke we saw earlier in both texture and application. What is different, however, is that this smoke blows up before it hits the ground, which signifies either one of 2 things. One is that each character's smoke mechanic, or if each character has a smoke mechanic, at the very least these 2 characters' smoke mechanics behave differently in the fact that one of them had to hit the ground before being deployed, and this one doesn't necessarily have to hit the ground before being deployed. It can also signify that you can deploy the smoke grenade yourself even when it's in midair. All that we can really tell is that smoke grenades behave differently than in Counter-Strike, and perhaps differently than each character's. Moving on to the dash, it just seems like a quick horizontal dash. The biggest question mark is whether it's going to have invulnerability frames. Personally, I hope it doesn't. And personally, I hope that at the very least there's some kind of movement impairment that is incurred by using it. But as we'll see later, there might be cost to using abilities that cost you either financially or some kind of other utility. So maybe that's the actual trade-off rather than balancing based off of in-game developments. Moving on to the third ability, it appears to be a very basic vertical movement dash ability, which then is immediately transitioned into something more interesting, which is that this character has access to what appears to be 5 knife throws, but at the very least they're one-shot headshots, and it looks like it looks like it's hit scan rather than a projectile fire. Alright, moving on to the last gameplay clip. We're still on the same character as we saw last time, the character with the knives and the dashes. Right now, they have a sniper, and this sniper clearly one shot to the body. There was no assist in the kill feed, so we can only assume that character that they were playing as was on full health. So if it's one shotting the body, it's very similar to the op in gameplay. You'll also notice that the smoke the player throws in the middle area shows that same tracer as before. Once again, don't know if that's spectator feed or if it's an actual in-game mechanic. And it is also abundantly clear in this clip, if it wasn't before, that the knives are hit scan, as that knife instantly has popped up in the kill feed upon throwing it. That's all that's really in this clip, other than that it's pretty sick and it's great for advertising what the game is capable of. Alright, moving on to a more speculative part of this video. Riot during the trailer showed a third-person view of some guys playing the game, and these guys are in what appears to be a freeze time, which means they're waiting for the round to start after the round had just ended previously. One of the players is on the close right of us, and we can see his monitor decently clearly. We can see that he starts out on a tab screen on a scoreboard screen, and you can see that there are 5 players on each team, which is much like Counter-Strike. And behind the tab screen you can see him swing his knife out, and you can see his inventory on the right of that. And that shows that inventory system is much like Counter-Strike. You can swap your weapons. Knife probably makes you run faster. What's more interesting is that the buy menu comes up next. And what you can see from the buy menu is that clearly his teammates and their inventories are shown on the left. The weapons are shown in the middle, which could have several pistols, 2 snipers, from what I can gather. Several other weapons that are hard to see. And what's more speculative is the fact that there are 2 player silhouettes on the right and 3 unknown things on the bottom. If we assume those player silhouettes are armor or protection based, like Counter-Strike's mechanics would hint at, then it's hard to know what the bottom 3 are, because if we assume that both of those are armor or protection based, then it leaves no room for utility in the actual grand scheme of the buy menu. And when I say utility, I mean smokes, flashes, grenades, molotovs, decoys, stuff like that. And we'll get into what this maybe could be later, but it's almost certainly tactical based abilities or things you have to purchase. Now the last piece of gameplay I want to show you is what appears to be a player in some kind of practice or training room. And this is the only time we really get to see any UI elements, which is important, because if you look at the bottom of the screen, you'll notice that on the left it says health, on the right it says ammo, and in the middle we have icons. And those icons are most likely character abilities. This is Knife Girl, so we've seen pretty much all of her abilities used. On the far right, that is her knife ability where she throws knives. On the left of that knife ability, that is probably the horizontal dash. On the left of that horizontal dash, that looks like a tornado icon, which would imply that that is the vertical dash that sends her up. And on the left, you see a smoke, and that is most likely the smoke they threw to enter the bomb site in that clip. Now, what is unknown is the gauge on the right that appears to be low. Now, if you remember from clip 2, the player had a fuel low indicator pop up on the screen towards the end. And if we assume that that fuel low indicator is in some way related to this gauge and the HUD element, which I think is fair, then fuel most likely is involved with powering some kind of ability, as the only thing that was happening during that fuel low was that the player's water smoke wall was still active. The player had not taken damage, and the player had not used an ability in the moment that fuel low appeared. So we have to assume by that the utility in the game is powered by the fuel. Now, it's hard to know how directly the fuel and the abilities are related. My assumption and my guess at this point is that fuel is used to power abilities, so you buy an amount of fuel in the shop and then can use that fuel on whatever you want, because buying dashes or buying jumps in the store seems a little bit awkward. So I'm assuming that maybe you get 2 dashes per round. As you can see in the HUD element, that the dash thing is kind of half full, which would imply to me that they've used 1 charge of the dash and still have 1 more if they have the fuel to use it. But let's say they've used 2 tornado jumps and they only bought enough fuel for a tornado jump and a dash, but they use both of it on tornado jump, so they can't dash anymore, even though they still have the charges. Something like that could be a situation in the mid rounds. And utility management with fuel is a new mechanic we haven't really seen in any kind of tactical shooter, so it should be interesting. Another thing to note about this fuel gauge is that it does not fill up when shooting enemies, or at the very least practice bots, so it is different from an Overwatch ultimate charge, and the fact that it's not going to fill up mid-round most likely. Now before we conclude, I have some notes that don't necessarily apply to any one clip. One of them is that the game seems to be much more fast-paced, at the very least in executes, than Counter-Strike does. For one, smokes last half as long and dissipate much faster, so executes are going to have to be much quicker, and in the same vein, defense is going to be harder if what we've seen is all we've gotten. As far as I've seen, the strongest defense ability on that stream was the wall that the character built to revive their friend. You could throw that into a choke point when you saw smokes fly in, and that would probably deny all 8 seconds. But the defense is going to have to be much more counter-execute based than stall your opponent out based, which is different than Counter-Strike, because if you put a smoke banana, and then another smoke banana, and then another smoke banana, and then a Molotov, nade, flash, you can keep a team there all day. But in this game, if you pre-smoke a choke point at the start of the round to deny a rush, that's only going to last 8 seconds, 7 seconds, and then the attackers can just run in. So you can't stall teams out. You're going to have abilities that are counter-execute. Now, this could obviously not be a good point if they announce some kind of character that has very good defensive abilities. We'll just have to see. Another thing that'll impact gameplay greatly is that the maps will have to be designed in accordance with the movement in the game, because we've seen at the very least one character with very extreme movement abilities relative to the tactical shooter genre. Anyone who's played Counter-Strike knows the power of verticality in the game. Boosting somebody up on a spot where someone's crosshair is not going to be, or they just won't be checking, is incredibly powerful, because even if they find them, it's hard to hit that vertical flick as fast as you need to and as accurately as you need to. So having a character like the Knife Girl who can jump super high in the air, get to elevated positions, is going to have to be balanced around in the map design that wouldn't necessarily have to be balanced around in something like Counter-Strike. And I think it should be difficult, but Volcano's on it, so if anyone can do it, he can. More game structurally wise, it's good to see them talk about netcode and anti-cheat at the forefront of their first trailer instead of showing more gameplay. It shows that the infrastructure behind the game will probably be strong. Also, infrastructurally wise, I would assume this game is going to be free to play for multiple reasons. One is that in the third-person view of the buy shop, we saw that the player had what appeared to be a skin for that main rifle we saw very consistently. And we also have heard them talk about anti-cheat a lot, which you need if you have free to play, as endless accounts for cheaters generally is not going to be a good thing when it's free to play, as they don't have to pay for those endless accounts. In conclusion, I'm optimistic about the game. It's going to be hard to compete with Counter-Strike's market, but Riot are clearly all in on this title, and Valve surely have taken notice, and hopefully we get to see some advancements in Counter-Strike Global Offensive over the next year before this game comes out, just so that Valve can compete.